Thus we've been given this, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that these laws of maintaining salah, maintaining the haram, making sure that the haram is away from us completely, keep away from that which is forbidden upon you, and go towards that which Allah has encouraged you to do. For these are what will raise you to higher levels. But it's sad sometimes when we find our Muslim brethren at large abandoning their duty. But look at the duty of our Prophet. His flag in the public world was salah. Look at our Imams. Why do we love them so much? These are not ordinary people who made mistakes in different locations. No, their movements were perfect. People may argue about that, but at the end of the day, study the history and you will be baffled as to how well they presented themselves, that their movements were so refined that it brought revolutions up to the highest level. Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam is fighting in Siffin, and the time of prayer he looks up and the battle is heated between Muawiyah and him. For Muawiyah was an enemy of Ahlulbayt. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. If people say Muawiyah was a good man, which people do, then I pray to Allah that may Allah raise them with Muawiyah. If Muawiyah is a good man, then we make good dua for them, that may Allah raise them with him. See, if someone says, may Allah raise you with Ali ibn Abi Talib, I will be indebted to you. Honesty speaks for itself. Take where the money is and put it in your mouth. For if you're going to do it, okay, you better follow it. Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam is fighting Muawiyah. And it's prayer time. So he looks up and the companion says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, what are you looking? He says, I'm looking for prayer time. Is it time? He said, we're in the middle of a battlefield. The enemy is here. The blood is gushing. The swords are clashing. What should we do? Should we not continue to fight? Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam says, if not for this salah, why are we fighting? If not for this salah, why are we here? What for? Because if you study it, Muawiyah wanted to eradicate salah. He wanted to take the pulpit of our Holy Prophet from Medina and move it to Damascus, because he did not want any people to remember the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is well known that Imam is saying, I'm fighting to maintain that salah, that mankind for the rest of their lives is guided properly to make sure that their haqq is given to them. You find Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, what does he do? In Karbala, 72 people fighting, plus an additional 25, 30 who were not really military men. And what do you find? You find he has only less than 100 people, if not 100. And there are tens of thousands on the other side. So from a military point of view, from a militaristic point of view, in order to sustain the enemy from attacking and running over you, you have to conserve every individual on your side. Yet history shows that in Karbala, Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam says that this salah is why we are fighting for. And you find that at the peak time when the war was taking place, it was prayer time, and Imam asked the enemy, stop for a moment, we want to say our prayers. They said, no. History shows clearly who was on whose side and what was the right and what was wrong. But Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam lost more than half his army just at prayer time. Half his army was annihilated because the arrows were just being showered at them. And they were praying Salatul Khawf. They were praying one rakat and going to fight and coming back and continuing. But look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing us a message in history as Muslims. Whatever faith you belong to, that the salah is the pivoting point of all these personalities, for they are coming there to preserve it. That all you mankind, whatever you profess, do not give up your deed in salah. That Imam Hussain ﷺ loses half his army, but he does not give up the salah. One would think that when you have a fire in your house, you will take the most valuable thing before the house burns down. Imam Hussein's house is burning down too. His house is being burnt down. He takes the most valuable thing into possession and he puts it into action. For that was what the message of Karbala was. So those of us who adhere to that standard, to the standards of Ahlulbayt, my brothers and sisters, it should be no excuse for us that we Muslims should live in this world without having to adhere to that. So Salah is very essential, and I can go on in numerous stories, no time. And as I shared with you yesterday, I think it's essential we continue with that. So وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ. He taught you the laws, what you need to do, what is halal and haram. Obey them. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر. تأمرون بالمعروف is what? This. Giving that which is the laws of Allah, which are prescribed by the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and forbidding that which He forbade. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. And then He gave you wisdom. Where that toolbox which is residing in your possession now, you become a craftsman. You know exactly when to use it. For if you're not a craftsman, you can take that same hammer and bring an entire wall down and be destructive rather than constructive. The same tool can be deadly. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. My brothers, I was going to touch on another subject. The reason I touched on this, briefly, forgive me if I've taken a bit of a tangent for a moment, it's because there is a necessity in our community that if we're going to have any spiritual motion, movement, forwardness, we have to bear allegiance to the fact that if we understand the truth, let's move towards it. Let's come towards it. Let's apply it, even on a small basis. Those of us who don't pray, find it difficult, then find a moment to even pray once and feel it, experience it, move it. You will see amazing things happen. Believe me, Allah will make our deeds so easy. A person comes to one of our ulamas and says, I pray, but nothing works out in my life. Everything I do fails. And our scholar asks them, when do you pray? He says, I pray before qadha. Did you notice, by the way, in our youths especially, they don't ask you when is prayer time. They always ask you when is qadha time. We usually never ask, when's the qadha time? Don't ask when is prayer time. So we should be moving forward at prayer time, moving. You know, there was a man who had a conversation with a scholar in the grave. It's a long story, I won't get into it. But he's asking him, he says, how come you look so beautiful down there? He said, that's not how you looked. You as a butcher were not like this. He said, this is my real face. The one you're seeing me down here in the grave, this beautiful face you see, this is really who I am. What you saw me on the earth, the way I looked was my earthly appearance under trial. He said, what gave you this position? He said, two things I did. One, I never measured the scale with unfairness. Whenever I added the meat, my scale, I always added a little extra to be sure that I gave them what they paid for. And second thing that I always did was when it was my prayer time, even if my customers were in line, I told them to stop. I shut my store down. I went to pray. I went to thank Allah, and I came back. And that is all I did. And Allah has afforded me this great place in my grave and in my akhirah.